We're switching it up a little bit this week on the Locked On Pirates podcast. Usually we have Mailbag Friday, but we're doing a Mailbag Monday to kick off the first full week of March.
You are Locked On Pirates, your daily Pittsburgh Pirates podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Locked On Pirates podcast here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team, your Pittsburgh Pirates every day. My name is Ethan Smith. To my right, as usual, on Mondays is Gary Morgan, joining you on March 4th, the first full week of March, the first month that we will see regular season baseball on March 28th, and ultimately the month where things are really going to get to start rolling on this show. I think we're going to start in the next couple weeks, seeing some more spring training news, some cuts that might not make people happy, some more injury news, some guys returning from injury, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's going to be a lot. But Gary, how are you doing on this wonderful Monday, March 4th, sir?
Very good. Very good. I'm a new uncle again. So
beautiful.
Good news, man.
I actually found out the official birth date of my kitten today. It was October 10th. Another October baby to join the extensive family over here. The other extensive family that we have on this show is FanDuel. Make sure you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. March Madness is almost here, so that'll be a fun time for you guys to go make some money over at FanDuel. And it was also a fun time for you guys when I said, oh, yeah, we're going to have a Friday mailbag. And then I just needed a day to take a break. Then I said I was going to do it Saturday. Apparently needed another day to take a break. So we pushed the mailbag back to Monday, gave you guys some time to submit some more questions. Some very good questions, as usual, from all of you that listen to this show. Thank you, as always, for listening to this show. And to get started, Gary, I want to start with a question that I already knew that I was going to get, and I already know the answer to, but I wanted to explain and kick off the show as to why this won't happen. And I'll kind of let you take the reins first. Open Creations, who listens to the show, is always on the lives all the time. Do you think Jared Jones makes the opening day roster, and what should the opening day roster look like? The first part is more of what I want to worry about. The second part, I'm going to have a big preview show later this month that's going to kind of predict what the opening day roster is going to look like. But thinking Jared Jones is making the opening day roster, Gary, I'll let you take it away because you've talked to me behind the scenes a little bit about this one already.
Yeah, he may end up looking like one of the better pitchers they have, but Jared Jones is not a guy who's gone deep into games an awful lot, and it's something that they really need to help him do if he's going to be a starter at this level. And part of that evolution is to get him to start throwing his secondary pitches a little bit more. What you see with the fastball and the slider, they're very real. They're great pitches, and there's no denying that. He could be an excellent bullpen arm tomorrow. And if they chose to make that his path, he might make it. Like there would be no reason not to just have him come up out of camp. But they want him to be a starter, and that takes a little bit longer. That's all. He's got the pitches. He just needs to trust them and needs to be able to bank on them a little bit more and needs to prove he can get deeper than 5 innings more routinely. I think that's going to take him a little bit of time.
Yeah, and I don't think that I know it's going to make people upset when he doesn't because, yeah, he's looked very good this spring. There's no denying that at all. I would like to see him throw a changeup a little bit more in spring because it doesn't matter right now. It's like, hey, these games don't matter. Let's see him throw that pitch a little bit more because we see him like go out and have these like scoreless innings and they're all great and dandy, but he's throwing the fastball and the slider and that's it. I don't think we really have a ton of questions about those pitches anymore. I mean, there's still going to be questions because we haven't seen him face MLB talent with those pitches on a consistent basis yet. So yeah, you're still going to have those questions, but I do think when he gets up here eventually, which I've said on the show, I would expect it in possibly May or even June. I think it could be that soon if he goes out and proves that he can pitch on a consistent schedule and go deeper into games. But to say that he's going to make the opening day roster, I think it's almost the same argument with Skeens, where obviously Skeens hasn't been there as long, but you want to see what these guys can do on a consistent schedule first, rather than just throw them into the fire and then say, oh, he can only go 5 innings every single start.
This is one of those nuanced discussions that people don't like to have. Like you want to do, you want to just be able to say they'll bring all their best players north. That's not how it works. And it's not just about being cheap. It's about, I want you to do this specific thing. And if you can't do this specific thing right this second, you're not as valuable as this other guy who is not nearly as good a baseball player as you are. It's just a fact of life when you're doing this sort of thing. He could be a super valuable player if he pans out as a starter. If he pans out as a bullpen, he could be a super valuable player, but not as valuable as that starter, and you know it. You have to do everything in your power to make sure you see that that's completely off the table before you make the opposite decision.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And I mean, you look at what the biggest need of this team is right now, and it's the rotation. And if Jared Jones, and you want him to be a part of that rotation, take your time with it. Same thing with Paul Skeens. I know I keep bringing up Skeens alongside him, but those are your two guys that are most likely to come up that you're going to want to come up into the rotation this year. But you don't want them to come up so quickly that they don't look like they're ready and then send them back down and then kill their confidence. Yeah, we've heard all about killing confidence in Pittsburgh lately and all across all three sports in terms of stuff like that. But moving on from that, Jared Jones, I just think it's a simple no. I know it's a tough no for some people, but it's a simple no. Dave Thomas actually asked an interesting one, and we've seen some good things from this kid already. Do you think Termarr leans into the power or average as he matures in the system, or is he good enough for us to see both? I'll start with that one. I will go with the latter and say I think he's good enough to do both. If he really leans into doing both, I mean, this kid really can hit the baseball. And if he matures well enough, I mean, you're not talking about him only being at 4 average guy. You're talking about him being, I think, a 270, 280s guy who can crank 25 homers a year if he really pans out, Gary. What do you think?
I think if Termarr wanted to go full on Tony Gwynn, he could hit 320 in this league and do it pretty much all the time. But in order for him to have power, what Termarr does, if you really pay close attention, is on the first 2 strikes of an at bat, he swings. I mean, he swings. And sometimes if he gets the right pitch, he'll do that again on that third strike pitch. But Termarr's got 2 main things he has to work on. He swings and misses on pitches in the zone still. That's not great. That doesn't speak to the very, very highly touted and scouted ball to bat skills. So I need to see it before I can believe it. I think he's a guy right now that he's trying to walk a tightrope. And I think he's getting power early in counts and falling back on his ball to bat skills for that last one in at bats. And maybe that's not enough for the eye to really play for him. So somehow, some way, I think when he reaches the height of his powers, he's going to be some kind of a combination of those 2 things.
Yeah, and I think that really you also have to look into the eyes of the fact that this kid is 19 and he's only probably going to get better than what we've seen in spring. And yeah, I mean, we've only seen a little bit in spring, but we've seen some pretty good things from Termarr Johnson. And you also have to understand that we haven't really seen him at the levels where it matters yet. He's been in Bradenton and Greensboro for the better part of his minor league career so far. When he gets to Altoona, Dave, I think that's when you'll really start kind of getting an idea of what kind of player Termarr Johnson's going to be. That's usually just when the evaluation starts for when you're thinking about him becoming a major league player. I will also tell you, I'm a firm believer that he could break this roster next year. Not out of camp, but I think he could break through and be on Pittsburgh's roster by June or July of next season. I really do. Not 2024, 2025. I mean, I think that's a real possibility if he takes the right trajectory and keeps building as a player that a lot of scouts say he is.
We're having a fun conversation this year about who wins second base, and whoever wins it immediately has to turn their head and look over their shoulder, because Chang and Termarr are coming like a freight train, and they both are very legitimate players.
and it's going to be fun. And that's the part of this whole like team right now is, yeah, there's some safe jobs there. The safe jobs are for the guys that are here and signed for the next decade. The other spots right now are a little more interesting, and we'll get into the next question that talks about first base. But before we do that, folks, we're going to talk about FanDuel. As I mentioned earlier, March is usually a season for basketball, and that's what's going on right now over at FanDuel, because you can get buckets with your first bet on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. You can bet on all your favorite NBA players and teams, and of course, college basketball with quick bets, live same-game parlays, exclusive props, and more. So just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot today, because FanDuel is an official sportsbook partner of the NBA and an official sponsor of the Locked On Podcast Network. And folks, also don't forget that Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. And now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows that cover every league. So find Locked On Sports Today now, available on the free Fire TV channels app. And folks, welcome back to Mailbag Monday. As usual, as I said, this will usually be on Fridays. I just wanted to do it on Monday this week because I have plans for the rest of the week as far as the shows are concerned. But we're going to continue right back into the questions. And this one interested me because it's not something that I've said on the show, but it's something that I've thought about at length. Stevie Wander, that is what his name is, with the long-term hole at first base, why isn't Henry Davis being worked in every few games? Saves DH for a defensive liability, drafted as a catcher, so it's an easy transition and extends longevity. It's Endy's position long-term, most likely. If Davis can hit for power, it makes sense. There's a lot to break down when you're thinking about Henry Davis playing the first base position, Steve, and I have thought about it. But also that was before Endy Rodriguez was put on the shelf for the entirety of this year. If Endy was healthy right now, I'd say you think about it. But he was drafted as a catcher, and it's only going into his first full year at that position at the MLB level. I think there's a patience factor that we have to set with Henry Davis, especially at that position. And mind you, he's looked pretty good in spring with what they've been asking him to do behind the plate. So what are your thoughts on what Stevie had to say there, Gary?
I think that right now, for one thing, it would be creating a problem that doesn't exist. They have plenty of people that can cover first base between Jared Triolo and Connor Joe, who are both going to make this team. And Rowdy Tellez, he's going to get playing time. Sorry. He is, and he's honestly not a lefty that typically needs a platoon. He'll get one here, partially at least, but he hits lefties. So I think he'll probably end up playing, the lion's share over there, whether he should or not. As far as Henry goes, I mean, right now you want him to catch. I don't know how you forecast out what Endy is. I don't even know that you can forecast out that Endy is 100% a locked-on MLB player. He didn't hit when he came up, and I'm not doing that. I'm not saying that to crap on him. I thought he looked great defensively. He did wonderful, but he didn't hit in AAA last year either. He didn't hit his way onto this team. He came up because it was time for him to come up, realistically. I don't think he made that happen. AA, he was a dynamo. Everybody loved what they saw from him. I didn't see that last year. Now he's going to take an entire year off, recovering from injury, apparently get married.
Yeah,
and then come back and he's not going to step in and take anything from anyone.
No.
He may go to first base. He's got experience there. So, I mean, if Henry can catch, it changes a lot of things. Just like Oviedo would have been a lock for this rotation this year, and we'd have been very happy about it. He's going to come back from his Tommy John at some point next year and maybe not be a lock. Think about it.
Yeah, with the guys that could be coming into this rotation, yeah, I mean, you're looking at Oviedo maybe being the fifth starter, possibly. And if Oviedo's the fifth starter in this rotation, folks, going into next year, I know we still have this year to talk about, but man, 2025, I think, is going to be a very fun year. And speaking of the rotation, Pitt Panther, who always asks questions for these mailbags, is Bailey Falter guaranteed a spot in the rotation due to the option situation, or is there a chance he could be either DFA'd or put in the bullpen? Not to push the panic button yet, because still a long way to go, but so far he's not exactly had the most inspiring spring. It's tough because, yeah, you brought up the option situation and all of that other stuff, and you get into that, and that's a major conversation when they're deciding this. I usually say that spring, yeah, you could take certain things that happen in spring training and say, yeah, these are good things. Like we could say Rowanzi bringing back the velocity and Luis Ortiz bringing back the velocity are good things. Those are good things. Just because Bailey Falter is giving up runs in spring training doesn't mean that he's an absolute crapshoot. Now, don't get me wrong. I would rather see other guys, but due to that situation with the options, it is possible that Falter is your fifth starter. And I mean, that will not be a thing that very long, I don't think, with some of the other options they have. But I'll let Gary speak on this a little bit too, because I mean, I just don't really know. There's still a lot of time before we really can truthfully answer that question.
To me, there's only one real legitimate way to consider Bailey Falter an option to be in the starting rotation, even as currently constructed, and that's that the team can't stop bringing him up on their own for this situation and mentioning his name. I don't see it. I didn't see it last year. I don't consider him an option. To be blunt, I would have preferred Andre Jackson if they were going to keep one of those two guys who have no options and showed a little something as a starter. I didn't like what I saw from Bailey Falter. They have two soft tossing lefties already. I don't need another. I don't see a bullpen role for him because I don't think he's close to as good as Jose Hernandez, and he's definitely not Aroldis Chapman. And I'm giving Barecki a shot to prove to me that he's not what he was last year. I mean, that was pretty awesome what he did last year. So if he's even close to that, I'm sorry. There's no place for a fourth lefty in that bullpen. To me, this is typical collateral damage. It's not like I want to lose the depth, but I'm okay losing this depth if I have to. Yeah. If somebody else wants them, I don't see it.
Yeah, and I for me, again, I think we're on the same page. There's other guys that I would rather see in that spot than Bailey Falter. There just are. There's other guys that actually
I'd rather see Willie Peralta at this point.
Same. I mean, it's
so
really...
I'm just not into it. And to me, he's got a long enough track record in MLB that I don't see a trend in any direction. I see a nice baseline of what he is.
Yeah, and I really think that when it comes to it, if he is in the rotation, it will not last long. It will not last long with what the other options that they have are available. And that's where we'll leave that one. F. Stover actually brings up a fun one. Can Edward Olivares be a starter? And he put in parentheses, top 3 outfield starts. He is getting the benefit right now to showcase himself in spring because Joshua Palacios has been injured, as well as Andrew McCutchen, even though I don't think Kutch really is an option out there to play the outfield. Olivares also has, and they were speaking about this on the broadcast a lot yesterday, they kept mentioning his name as one of those guys that has real power. And he does. I mean, last year he only hit 12, but that was also double what he hit the year before. And his expected home run rate was 17.5. I mean, this is a kid that if he really taps into his potential with the power, albeit he's not the greatest fielder in the world, but that hasn't stopped them with anybody else on this team. Yeah, I mean, I think he could be a starter easily, especially, I mean, you're talking about a kid who could potentially hit 20 bombs if he really gets into his own. And I spoke about this on the show last week, actually. Really, his biggest thing is he just has to bring that exit velocity up. He already has the launch angle, he has the raw power. He just doesn't hit the ball hard enough. If he can start hitting the ball harder, folks, yeah, you're looking at a guy that could slot in the right field and hit 20 home runs in his sleep if he can bring that exit velocity into the 90s.
I think he could. I honestly think Connor Joe is going to probably take more at bats this year than people are thinking, and I think he'll earn them. Connor Joe is probably a better baseball player than your mind immediately wants to let you believe. I think he's probably going to carve out a pretty significant role for himself this year. They might be forced at times to put him in right field because they actually want his bat.
Yeah.
And I mean, he's a good, solid contributor in this lineup. If you think about it, God, he'd be a beautiful number 9 hitter, wouldn't he?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, to turn the rotation, the lineup around every time. I think Connor Joe's going to probably end up getting a lot of starting time out there. To me, Olivares is probably on this team, but Joshua Palacios, he's got some work to do, I'd say, to ensure he's the 4th, because Celestino is kind of crawling up his backside a little bit.
Yeah, and there's another guy in there, too, that I don't think they have to worry about that much in Billy McKinney. But Celestino, I think, sneaky little signing by Ben Cherington this offseason. Very
Kutch,
sneaky.
too. Kutch really does want to play right field. And I know that they haven't started him yet, but he's going to start this week. And I know they want him to play out there. I know he wants to. I think they have to have that because they're going to need the DH spot to rest O'Neal Cruz and Henry Davis. Keep Henry's bat in the lineup too when he's not catching.
Yeah. And yeah, like and even Tellez on days that you want Tellez to DH, there's another dynamic to that as well. So you don't really want to just give the DH spot to Kutch. We have a couple more questions here to finish up in the third segment. And usually the third segment lately has been spring news and notes. One of you guys asked about spring, so we'll get into that in just a moment. But before we do that, we're going to talk about game time. Well, when I arrive at PNC Park April 5th for Pirates opening day, hopefully I will be using Game Time, because you should download the Game Time app today and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off, because you shouldn't have to worry when you buy tickets to your next big event. Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you, with killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their best price guarantee. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. Game Time has deals on tickets right up to the start of the event and even an hour after it starts. So if it's 5:12 Eastern time on April 5th and I still don't have tickets, I could still walk into PNC Park an hour late, even though it'd be like the 5th inning by that point. It's the place to find last-minute seats, and the Game Time guarantee means you'll always get the best price if you or myself find tickets in the same section and row for less at PNC Park. Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. So download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off, and download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, folks, and welcome to the third and final segment of today's episode of Locked On Pirates. And since the third segment lately has been spring news and notes, John, I always butcher your last name, even though you ask these questions all the time. I want to always say it's Sarakowski, so you'll know it's you when you listen to the show. But what are your surprises of spring so far? Really, if I could start just with one, and then I'll let Gary go for a couple of his. Henry Davis, man, has just been hitting the cover off the baseball this spring so far. He's almost playing as if he's like in a prove it mode. It's like, yeah, I was a number one pick. I'm here. I'm playing baseball. And I've liked what I've seen there from Henry a lot. I've liked what I've heard and seen from Henry behind the plate as far as his blocking is concerned. I'd like to see the Pirates kind of tell their pitchers to throw some of those changeups and curveballs in the dirt a little bit more so we could see those things. But I almost think, and this is just me fabricating things, but I think it's fun. I almost think when they got Yasmani Grandal, Henry Davis was like, yeah, I'm going to kick it up a notch in spring so we could do this. He shouldn't have to, but that's what I've liked, what I've seen so far from spring. And Henry really has been one of the biggest surprises so far for me.
I mean, biggest surprise for me was that they got Keller done before spring started.
Yeah.
I didn't expect that. I thought that would bleed into the season a little bit. So there's that. Aside from that, I have not been astonished by too much of anything. Everybody's been pretty much chalk. I guess I'm a little bit surprised that Nick Gonzalez looks like he's still struggling with all the same things that he was struggling with. Because there's no way they sent him into the offseason telling him not to work on fixing his approach at the plate so that he can cut back on the strikeouts. He looks exactly the same to me. He's going to be promising when he makes contact. He's going to be useless when he doesn't. And there's no in between. He's probably trending closer to a bench role, I would say, than a starting role, wouldn't you? I mean, looking at this roster, I don't know that that's surprising. I guess I'm more surprised that he doesn't look like he's changed anything.
Yeah, and I think that's a big deal. I mean, when you look at these guys right now, I mean, you would like to see some things that look different. Now, obviously, for certain guys, you want to see some things stay the same, like Brian Hayes still just mashing the baseball everywhere and playing great defense. That's been a very fun thing to watch. You mentioned his name earlier, and I believe he's an NRI, so it'll kind of go into this next question of which non-roster invitees have the best chance to crack the opening day roster. That's from Brendan. Willie Peralta, man, he's looked a little good in what he's been doing so far. He's
very good. Honeywell's looked really good.
And fun fact, I will have a piece on Steel City Pirates about this, about some of these guys and what they could do to impact this roster. Some of these NRIs, folks, I know a lot of times you guys see these things and it's like, whatever, that's just a AAA guy. But there's a reason that they got invited to camp to come show out and play. And for Peralta and Honeywell, I know he hasn't looked great, but Josh Fleming, these are guys that can be very adequate players for this team if they need to be. They're not asking Peralta, Honeywell Jr., and Fleming and some of these other guys to be the guys. They're saying, hey, we might need you to be. And that's not a bad thing at all. And I think that these guys so far outside of Fleming's looked up and down a little bit to me.
Fleming looks like he's struggling with exactly what he struggled with last year, which is why he was an NRI. There's always a reason why they were an NRI. And that's the first thing you look at is, did they fix that? Is that changed? Is that different than what was expected because of what they were doing? Ben Heller is another guy that I haven't seen quite yet, but if he can get right, he's got an incredible slider, and he's one of those guys that you like to stick in your bullpen, and he can get you out of a jam, just getting a strikeout here and there. I could see him. This NRI is very familiar to you, but I think Hunter Stratton has been very impressive. I really do. He looks different. He looks like the Hunter Stratton that I watched just mowing guys down in AAA, because he'd almost like he tried too hard when he got here last year, and he was given very sporadic opportunities. Ended up losing his roster spot. They re-signed him. That kid's got a real shot to help this year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I agree. I mean, that's the thing with the NRIs is I do think that when you look up and down those guys, most of them will start in AAA probably. But say we have an injury in the rotation or an injury in the bullpen, you have guys that you can look at and say, oh, that's like a real MLB guy. Like he's been here before. And I think that's the biggest thing. And we'll end on this last question again from Open Creations. And I think it's a great ending question. Who are your top, he says top 10, but we'll just boil it down. What are your top probable breakout players for the Pittsburgh Pirates this year? That is a interesting one, and I'll let Gary go first because I am interested to see what he has to say on this.
Let's just stay in MLB, and I won't go into the prospect realm because it would be too easy to just say Termarr and Skeens and all that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Henry Davis, I think Henry's going to arrive this year, and I really do. And the bat is, I think he's going to show exactly why he was a 1-1 this year.
Yeah, and Henry's on that list. And this one's going to be interesting because you're saying probable breakout players. And a lot of people might make fun of me if they're still listening to the show this deep into it. I'm going to say O'Neal Cruz. I just am. I mean, and people would say, well, he kind of already did. What has O'Neal Cruz really done to be a breakout player so far in his MLB career?
Yeah, I can give you that one. I'd probably throw Triolo into that group.
Yeah.
I think he's another guy. Higuera. Those are all options.
I mean, even Jack Sawinski. A lot of people could say he could have a breakout year this year, even though he hit a lot of home runs last year. You'd like to see him do it more consistently. Edward Olivares could be on that list. I love how we said top 10, and now I've already like 5 or 6. And even pitching. Maybe even Rowanzi or Luis Ortiz or Quinn Priester do really step up and actually be guys. Jared Jones, I think, is a cop-out answer. I just really do. I think he's going to have a fun spot in this rotation. But there's a lot of breakout candidates for this team going into 2024. Thank you all for the questions. Those very good questions. They loaded the entire show, which is usually always the goal. And we enjoy mailbag episodes. We also enjoy Q&As that Gary does over at Steel City Pirates all the time. So make sure you guys go check those out if you enjoy this format. And we'll obviously have 4 more episodes this week. I mentioned I'll have a piece on the NRIs on Steel City Pirates at some point this week. And Gary will have the Pirates Fan Forum, as he always does on Thursday. What do you have planned for this week on that show?
We got a new guest this week, so we'll see how those training wheels come off. And we'll see what the news week brings us to talk about.
Yeah, it'll be very fun. And of course, it's the first full week of March, meaning baseball is almost here, folks. We are 24 days away from opening day. There'll be tons of fun content on this show to come and follow on YouTube, Spotify, Odyssey, Google Play, or Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcast. But until tomorrow, folks, I will see you on the flip side. You will see Gary next week. Have a great Monday.